There's been a lot of talk lately about housing and the lack of affordable housing. This national discussion is long overdue. Of the potential solutions currently being discussed, most are typical short-term band-aids that fail to address or even acknowledge some of the root causes of our affordable housing crisis. Housing costs are typically the biggest monthly financial nut to crack for most people. Inflated housing costs and the hyperinflated housing costs that we are now seeing all over the country wreak havoc not only on buyers, renters, and those in need of housing, but on employers and the economy in general. The effectiveness of any problem's solution is a direct function of how comprehensively we understand all of the factors contributing to that problem. As far as the affordable housing crisis goes, we need a comprehensive plan that effectively addresses all of the factors contributing to the crisis. Or we can continue to throw out pacificational band-aids that fail to solve the problem, thus enabling those profiting off the problem to continue profiting off the problem. There are two major factors contributing to the affordable housing crisis that no one is talking about. Political bias seems to make no difference here. It doesn't matter if the publisher or news outlet has a conservative or liberal bias. Nobody is talking about these two factors.
A pretty face, an ugly mind. She'll steal your soul. She'll rob you blind. Now if you see her, it's best to run. Cut you down, man. It's all for fun. Yeah, she says the world's insane.
Over the past 50 years, the percentage of owner-occupied homes has decreased substantially, while the percentage of investor-owned homes has increased substantially. This is a huge, albeit never talked about, driver of inflated and hyperinflated housing costs. The original purpose of housing was to provide shelter. Shelter, being one of human beings' most basic survival necessities, is a vital resource. But our no-holds-barred version of capitalism threw housing into the free market as if it were a cheeseburger. From the consumer's vantage point, in this case, someone buying or renting housing, the basic supply and demand equation looks like this. Demand divided by supply equals price. The higher the supply, the lower the price. The lower the supply, the higher the price. Conversely, the higher the demand, the higher the price. The lower the demand, the lower the price. But there's another aspect of demand that no one is talking about. That aspect is the subset of people who already have their housing needs met, but are hoarding much needed housing in order to exploit and profiteer from those in need of housing. There is an ironic sense of entitlement among many of those hoarding housing. The mindset goes something like this. I am entitled to hoard housing I don't really need in order to exploit and profiteer from those who really do need housing. I am entitled to prevent those who really do need housing from purchasing their own housing, from attaining housing security, and from having a means with which to build their own equity. Why? Because I am entitled to rent out the housing I've been hoarding at inflated rates to those who truly do need housing. I am entitled to sell off the housing I've been hoarding at inflated prices. And furthermore, I am entitled to sell off the housing I've been hoarding without being burdened with concerns about the hardships and impositions my dispositions have caused my renters. You know, I probably could have bypassed that whole paragraph by sharing the story that's been going around lately about landlords wanting to rebrand themselves as housing providers. a housing market kept in short supply and in which the demand has been artificially increased by allowing the hoarding of housing by those who have already had their housing needs fulfilled, allows landlords to reach their goal of a work-free income stream and/or the effortless buildup of equity. Now, I can understand wanting to hoard housing as a means of investment. We all grew up constantly hearing the economic advice, invest in real estate, invest in real estate. I cringe when I hear those commercials.
Order my seminar today and I'll teach you how to make an extra 50 grand a year flipping homes.
Well, that extra 50 grand didn't grow on a tree, nor did it come out of thin air. It likely came from people who've been working their butts off and could have put that money to a much more meaningful, beneficial, and productive use, such as putting their kids through college, saving up for retirement, spending more one-on-one time raising their kids, spending money in their local economies.
Well, it benefits everybody. The butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker.
Our no-holds-barred version of capitalism allows landlords to reach their goal of a work-free income stream and/or the effortless buildup of equity. No need to start a new business, no need to invent a new product, no need to expend any time and energy providing a service, no need to work long hours, no need to make any meaningful contribution to society at all. Instead, just utilize laws of supply and demand and inflation to take economic advantage of those in need of housing. This hoarding of housing in order to exploit and profiteer from those in need of housing is rat race economics at its ugliest. Just buy a house and some land before someone who really needs it can buy it and rent it back to them at inflated rates or sell it to them at inflated prices. It's a no-brainer.
Come to my seminar and I'll show you how.
If all of the housing hoarders were taken out of the supply and demand equation, the ensuing decreases in housing costs would make a meaningful and measurable economic impact in the lives of many people.
He was more feared and more powerful than all former kings of the land.
Feudalism 2.0! Not your grandmother's feudalism, but it's new and improved! What's in your wallet?
You've probably heard the saying, he who controls the resources controls the people. Hoarding housing and land is a very effective means of investing because shelter and housing not only are vital resources, but they are real. Everyone must have shelter and land in order to survive and to prosper. Controlling those two vital resources by hoarding housing and land and by systemically ensuring that there will always be a large group of people who do not own their own land and housing is a surefire means of economically enslaving people. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book. It's one of the reasons the founding fathers themselves were so happy to escape feudalism. Thomas Jefferson, in a 1785 letter to James Madison, wrote this: "Another means of silently lessening the inequality of property is to exempt all from taxation below a certain point and to tax the higher portions of property in geometrical progression as they rise. Whenever there is in any country uncultivated lands and unemployed poor, it is clear that the laws of property have been so far extended as to violate natural right. The earth is given as a common stock for man to labor and live on. If, for the encouragement of industry, we allow it to be appropriated, we must take care that other employment be furnished to those excluded from the appropriation. If we do not, the fundamental right to labor the earth returns to the unemployed. It is too soon yet in our country to say that every man who cannot find employment but who can find uncultivated land shall be at liberty to cultivate it, paying a moderate rent. But it is not too soon to provide by every possible means that as few as possible shall be without a little portion of the land. The small landholders are the most precious part of a state. Nearly 80 later, Abraham Lincoln was quoted by a contemporary of his, Robert Brown, in Brown's book Abraham Lincoln and the Men of His Time, as saying this: "The land, the earth God gave to man for his home, sustenance, and support should never be the possession of any man, corporation, society, or unfriendly government any more than the air or water, if as much. An individual or company or enterprise acquiring land should hold no more than is required for their home and sustenance, and never more than they have in actual use in the prudent management of their legitimate business. And this much should not be permitted when it creates an exclusive monopoly. All that is not so used should be held for the free use of every family to make homesteads and to hold them so long as they are so occupied." Very much in line with the take what you need and leave the rest philosophy of sustainability and humane coexistence, Lincoln was basically saying that no one should be able to own land they are not physically living or working on. It's amazing just how far we've gotten today from that train of thought. Jefferson and Lincoln knew just how ripe those in need of land were for being exploited by those hoarding land. They knew a new style of feudalism was a very real possibility. And here we are today, their fears realized. Imagine the country today if we had followed Lincoln's advice. Imagine the country today if we had taken the economic incentive out of hoarding land by implementing Jefferson's geometric property tax. So there you have it, the first major factor contributing to the affordable housing crisis that no one is talking about. No one except a couple guys like Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln.